Alright, Swifter, in our second video for the Hackathon project, we are going to set up the user interface to be able to add a new Hackathon team. We'll add Google Cloud Firestore to our project. We'll set up the data access rules, and we'll add code so that our app saves data. And the code that we've written previously in Snacktacular is incredibly reusable, so we'll be able to put this together really quickly. Now, even though you'll see that we're accessing gists from our textbook, the same gist links are included in the description below the video. So next up, we're going to add a table view controller. Make sure that you subclass it as a UI table view controller. We'll call it the team detail view controller. This will be a table view controller with static cells. So create a Swift file for that and then associate it with that new table view controller and create two segues, one for add team and show team, and use the appropriate type of segue. So on the main storyboard in the library, find the table view controller. That's the one in the gold circle. Drag it over, plop it on the storyboard to the right of the existing view controller, and in the attributes inspector, change the cell type from dynamic prototype to static cells. Next, let's add a new subclass of UI table view controller. So I'm going to right click on top of team list view controller, select new file, Swift file, Cocoa Touch class. Next, make sure that you've subclassed UI table view controller. I'm going to name this Team Detail Table View Controller. Press Next, Create. Now head back to the main storyboard, and in the Identity Inspector, make sure that you've clicked on your new view controller. You can select for class type the class that you just created, Team Detail Table View Controller. Now add a navigation controller. So with the table view controller selected, go up under Editor, embed in Navigation Controller. Then you can drag this navigation controller up and out of the way. I'm going to control drag from the Add button up to this new navigation controller. Let go, select Present Modally as my segue type. Then, this is very important, we don't want this to present in page sheet mode, we want it to be in full screen. So select the segue by clicking on the circle in the middle of this line, go up to the Attributes Inspector, and under Presentation, select Full Screen. If we don't do that, then when we return to the Team's List View controller, the view will appear and the view did appear methods will not fire. So you want to do full screen so those methods fire when you return to this first view controller. Next, add the second segue. That's going to be from the team cell, and instead of clicking on the cell, I'm going to click right in the document outline, control drag over, not to the navigation controller, but directly into the team detail view controller, and I'm going to select show here. This is a show segue. Then click on the ball on the segue line. We don't have to change the presentation type here because this is a show segue. This is already going to be full screen, but we'll set the segue's identifier, and we'll call this show team upper camel case, and we'll click on the other segue, and we'll call this one add team upper camel case. Next up, we're going to create the team class, and it's going to have the following properties. Team name, university, both strings. Coordinate is going to be a CL location coordinate 2D. Remember what that means with import statements. Project name's a string, project description string, posting user ID string, and created on is a date. Now we're also going to create a designated initializer and a convenience initializer. The convenience initializer will have no parameters to pass in, but it will create empty strings for all of the strings, today's date for the date, and an empty CL location coordinate 2D for that type. So I'm going to create this new file for my team class right underneath my screen delegate.swift. I'll right click there, select new file. This is going to be a Swift file. Next, give it the name team, upper camel case, because it's a type. Click create. Then since one of these class properties is going to be of type CL location coordinate 2D, we need to import core location because that's how we indicate that this file knows about the core location library. Then we'll say class, capital T team, open and close curlies, var team name string, var university string, var coordinate and look what would happen if I got rid of the import core location. If I start to type in the type name CL location coordinate, hey, nothing shows up for the CL library. That's because I haven't imported it yet. So I'll go back up here, import core location, and now I can select the type CL location coordinate 2D, and then I'll add the other properties, var project name string, var project description string, var created on date, var posting user ID string, and var document ID string. Then, since we haven't initialized any of these values, we need to create a default initializer. So we'll say init and then pass in all of the parameters, their types, and separate them by commas. So we'll say init and then in between the parens, team name string, university string, coordinate CL location coordinate 2D, project name string, product description string, created on date, posting user ID string, document ID string. And then open and close curlies. Tedious, I know, but you gotta do it. Then in between the curlies, we're going to take all the values we just passed in and set them to the property names of the class. So we'll say self and then each of the property name equals, and then the parameter passed in. They have the same name, so it's easy to do. Self.teamName equals team name, self.university equals university, self.coordinate equals coordinate, self.projectname equals project name, self.projectdescription equals project description, self.createdOn equals createdOn, self.postinguserid equals postinguserid, and self.documentid equals document ID. Watch your code completion, make sure that everything formats properly, you didn't spell anything wrong. Then we're going to create a convenience initializer, and this convenience initializer is going to pass in no properties, and by default it's going to create everything with empty values. So empty strings, or today's date, or generic CL location 2D, which has, I think, coordinate 0, 0. So the way we create a convenience initializer is use the keyword convenience, space init. Since we're passing in no parameters here, we'll do open and close parens, then open and close curlies, and then inside we say self init, and we've got to always call the original initializer. Now in between the first curly and the call to the default initializer, we've got to make sure that we format all the values we're passing into the default initializer. But what I'll do is I'll go up here, highlight the default initializer call, copy it, paste it inside of my convenience initializer, and then what we just copied was the stuff that was used to initialize a new object of type team. What we're doing down here is we're going to pass in empty values to that original initializer. So in this convenience initializer, this will allow us to create a new object of type team by typing in the class name, that's capital T team, with just an open and close parenthesis after it. And that will create a new team object with empty strings and other blank values. So inside this line in the convenience initializer that calls the default initializer above it, I'll pass in those blank values. So after team name here, after the colon, I'll pass in empty string, university empty string, coordinate is going to be CL location coordinate 2D, open and close parens to create that. Project name empty string, project description empty string. Created on is going to be the date type with a capital D, open and close parens. That'll give me the current date and time. Posting user ID empty string, and document ID empty string. Then to create the rest of the user interface for the team detail table view controller, we're going to add cancel and save bar button items. We're going to have 4 sections with 1 cell each. The first 3 are going to have text fields. The last one's going to have a text view. The text view should have alignment left, and that text view should be in a row of height 96. And just a reminder, for static table view cells, we do not need to add that separate height for row at table view function. So then let's head over to the main storyboard. We'll add the bar button items first. So click on library, search for bar button item, drag one over to the left, right on top of the back button, drag the other one over to the right-hand side of your navigation item. Then for this rightmost bar button item, in the attributes inspector, we'll set the system item to save. And for the leftmost one, we'll set its system item to cancel. Then click on the table view section. Notice the whole section highlights in light blue here. You can see it's highlighted over in the document outline. I'm going to change the number of rows down to 1. Then I'll click on table view in the document outline and set the number of sections to 4. To change the heading, just double click on the heading itself. So I'll double click on section 1. I'll change this to team name. Section 2 will be university. Section 3 will be project name. And section 4 will be description. Then in the library, I'm going to find a text field and drag it over into the cell in the first section, stretch it out, and here's a trick. Instead of dragging over a new text field, I can just copy the text field that I put into the first cell. So I've clicked the field and typed Command-C, and then click on the content view for each of the additional cells and do a Command-V. That will paste in a text field with the same dimensions inside of that cell's content view. I'll do the same in project name section, select content view, Command-V. Now this last cell is going to have a text view, not a text field, so search for that in the library, drag it over, plop it down. Its dimensions are all off, so let's go over to the size inspector. Actually, I want to change the row height for this cell, so inside of the description section, I'm going to click on Table View Cell, then in the size inspector, I'll set the row height to 96 to give me some more room. Click back on my text view, resize it so that the upper left corner is where I want it to be inside of the cell. Then I'll click on the right-hand side and adjust that, and adjust the bottom. And then I'll just put in some bogus placeholder text in the different fields in the view. So I'll say team name, university, project name, and description of awesomeness goes here. So now we want to add a toolbar, and the way that we do this is we can click on both navigation controllers, the yellow ball and the dock for each of those 2 navigation controllers, and select Shows Toolbar in the attributes. Then we'll drag a bar button item into the toolbar area of the team detail view controller. We'll call this find location. That'll put it over on the left-hand side, but if we add a bar button flexible space, it'll push it over to the right. And then we'll create outlets for cancel bar button, save bar button, team name field, university field, project name field, and description text view. And we'll create IB outlets for find location pressed, cancel button pressed, and save button pressed. So back in the main storyboard, let's click on the dock for the navigation controller going into the detail table view controller, and in the attributes inspector, select shows toolbar. We'll head over to this first navigation controller, click on its dock, and also set it to shows toolbar. Then we'll move back to the detail table view controller, click on the library, find a bar button item, drag it into the toolbar. Let's change the title of that bar button to find location, head up to the library, grab a flexible space bar button item, put it to the left of find location. We see that pushes this button over to the right. And now to the assistant editor mode to add our outlets and actions. Click on Team Detail Table View Controller, option click on Main Storyboard, we're side by side. And then I'll control drag over and create 4 IB outlets: Team Name Field, University Field, Project Name Field, and Description Text View. Also, when you create a new UI Table View Controller subclass, you get a whole bunch of comments in here. So I'm going to delete all of the comments and this extra function in here so that the only function I have in here is viewDidLoad, and that doesn't have any comments inside it. Now, right under viewDidLoad, before the curly brace that ends the class, I'm going to drag over my IB action. So first I've got cancel button pressed coming from the cancel button, and I'll make sure that I select the type to UI bar button item. I'll create one control dragging from save button. I'll call that save button pressed. Inside cancel button pressed, I'll write the code that we always use in our cancel button. So we'll say let is presenting in add mode equals presenting view controller, which is a property of the view controller, and make sure that you select the right one. Presenting view controller, there's a presented. Don't select that. Don't select presentation. I've seen a lot of students screw this up. You want presenting. Even better, you could copy and paste this code from your previous apps. It'll never change. Is a UI navigation controller. If is presenting in add mode, open and close curlies. Then we want to dismiss, and animated is true, completion is nil. Else, other set of curlies, we want to pop. So we say navigation controller question mark dot pop view controller, and for animated we pass in true. Ooh, and also get back into the assistant editor. I forgot to add an IB action for the find location bar button item. We'll call that find location pressed. Good. Now it's time to put a little code in the team detail table view controller. We want to create an instance variable named team of type team. Remember, this is going to catch what we're passing over from the team list view controller. In viewDidLoad, we want to call that convenience initializer that we created. Remember, the one that passes in no parameters. So it'll initialize the team value if we're not passing anything over with a bunch of empty strings and other empty values. We'll create a function called update user interface. We'll call it from viewDidLoad. We'll use that to update the different fields in the text view. Super easy. Let's get it done. In Team Detail View Controller, just under the IB outlets we just created, we'll create that new property var lowercase team colon uppercase team exclamation point, declaring team of type team. Then down in viewDidLoad, we'll make sure that we don't have a nil team. We'll say if lowercase team equals nil, open and close curlies. And if that's the case, we'll say lowercase team equals uppercase team, which is our type, open parens. We get 2 options for initializers, the default initializer down below with all those parameters, and our convenience initializer, which is the top one with no parameters. Select that because we want it to initialize all of our properties as either empty strings or otherwise empty values. Then after viewDidLoad, let's create that func update user interface. Open and close parens because no parameters are being passed in. Open and close curlies. Let's make sure that we call that in viewDidLoad. So after checking for nil, call update user interface with a parens. And then the code in update user interface is just teamNameField.text equals team.teamName, universityFieldName.text equals team.university, projectNameField.text equals team.projectName, and descriptionTextView.text equals teamProjectDescription. Now in the next video, we're going to create a teams class to handle loading all the teams at once, but for now, just to get things working, we'll set up our teams property and team list view controller to an empty array of type team, and we'll set the text label of the cell to update with the teams array elements team name property. So we'll head to team list viewController.swift. By the way, sometimes there's some quirkiness when using CocoaPods with Xcode. And you might see messages like this one that says no such module, in this case it's Firebase. You can ignore this, or if you want to go ahead and build and run, if you'd installed it properly, this error will go away after the build and run. Now, if there's a real error in there, that error will show, but just go ahead and ignore any of the ones that show up in your import statements that are associated with CocoaPods. Those will go away at the build and run when you've got error-free code. Then we can delete the literals that we put in for the string array, and instead we'll say var teams : and we'll declare this as an array of teams. So that's our class team in between the square brackets, equals open and close square brackets. And then down here in cell for row at, we'll make sure we say teams index path dot row and then dot team name. And so now we're going to set things up so that we can save team data in Cloud Firestore. And the first time we went through this, it seemed kind of complicated. But in this app, it's structured very similar to the Snacktacular app. You're going to see that we're going to do the same thing, and in fact, we'll be able to reuse a lot of the code that we wrote in the Snacktacular app. Now first, whenever we first set up a project and we start to use the database, we've got to go to the Firebase console and configure Cloud Firestore. So set up the database and configure the database access rules. Then in the team class, we're going to go ahead and add a save data method. This is going to save every team as a document inside of a collection named teams. And just as a reminder, reflecting on what we did with Snacktacular, we definitely need to create a computed property for dictionary, and since in a future video we're going to work with latitude and longitude, we'll add those computed properties too. Then in the team detail view controller, we want to make sure that we add code inside of our save button press action. That's specifically got to go through and grab everything out of the user interface elements and put them in our team object so that everything is updated in team before we save that to Cloud Firestore. Then we'll call team.saveData, and if it works, we'll perform the same code that we did inside a cancel button pressed. So I'm back in the Firebase console and I'm inside of the Hackathon app. And I'm going to click over here on database on the left-hand side. Now, since I've never done anything with the database inside of this Google project, I need to first click on Create Database under Cloud Firestore. Google will remind me that I need to set the rules, so I'll click on Next to do that. I'm going to keep this as Start in Production Mode. I'm asked to select a location. I don't think it matters all that much, but I'm going to select one on the east coast of the US, then click Done. We get a little swirly animation as things are being created for us inside of the Google Cloud. Then we see this data page with blank data. It doesn't have any data in it yet, but click on the Rules tab, and we want to update these. We want to change where it says Document in here. I'm going to double click to select the word Document and then replace this with the word Anything, one word, all lowercase. Then on that line just below it, for allow read and write, we're going to change the default in here, which is if false, which essentially is if false is true, which is never the case. And we'll replace false with request.auth, exclamation equals for not equals, null. Now what that means is we're going to allow read and writing of anything if the user authorization is not null, meaning we've got back a valid user authorization. This is fine security for our demo app. Every user has the same data access, read and write privileges. If you wanted more granular security, Google allows you to set up more complex rules and a code behavior around the rules. We don't need that for our simple Hackathon app, so these settings will do fine. That's it. Click on Publish. And our data's got a home in the cloud. Now our learning video described all the code that we've written for access in our Snacktacular app, but we also mentioned you can reuse a lot of that code too. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to go into chapter 9.5 and we'll scroll down and we'll find the GitHub gist to grab the code that we've already written and make some modifications. Now the first thing we want to do is to create a computed property called dictionary, and this creates a dictionary from all of the properties in our class. The reason we want to do this is Cloud Firestore saves stuff out as a dictionary. So whenever we refer to an object of type team and it's a .dictionary property, we'll immediately create a dictionary that we can save to Google's cloud. So I'm going to click on this link below. I'm going to grab the code and just use this as a reference. I'm going to have to change all of the properties inside though, and that's because the properties inside of the team class are different from the properties inside of the spot class that this was based on in the Snacktacular app. So I'll highlight these 3 lines. That's all I need to create a computed property named dictionary. Copy it with a Command C, head back over to my team class. I'll paste that in after these other properties. A computed property is a property, it just doesn't hold any value. Its value instead is computed, and we're going to compute a dictionary here using the other property values that we've got. And you see what the structure for the dictionary is. I've got the key name in here as a string in between double quotes, and the convention is to use the same key name as the property name. The key name and the variable holding the value that you're about to save out are separated by a colon, and then each of these values of the dictionary is separated by a comma. And to make things easy, you can just go up here and copy the property name so that you can make sure that you're not getting any typos. And so that's what I'll do. I'll highlight team name, copy it with Command C, then do my double quotes down below, paste in team name, colon, paste in team name afterward without the double quotes. That's going to be the value for the key name. And then comma, I'll continue for all these other values, quotes, university, colon, university, comma, quotes. And the latitude and longitude are a bit different because we're going to have to use a computed property for those as well, because we're only storing a coordinate in here, and the coordinate is where we're going to get the longitude and latitude. Now, we had the same thing in Snacktacular, so I can actually repeat what I've done down here with latitude and longitude, but I need to complete that with my two computed properties. So I'm going to say double quote latitude, colon, latitude, comma, double quote longitude, colon, longitude. And then I'll use the standard procedure for the other properties. So it'll be in quotes project name, colon project name, comma, in quotes project description, colon project description, comma, in quotes created on, colon created on, comma, in quotes posting user ID, colon posting user ID. And I'll put in comma, quotes, colon, end in a square bracket. I'll delete the old stuff that I copied back that has all of the properties from Spot. I don't need those. And then I'll fill in the last key value pair for document ID, in quotes, document ID, colon, document ID. Oh, and it looks like I'm missing a quote here in latitude, so that'll fix everything. Now remember, we're going to do computed properties for latitude and longitude, and we've got a gist for that too. So we can head back into our book, find the gist for latitude and longitude, open it up, highlight and copy this code, head back to team.swift and Xcode. I'm going to paste these just before the dictionary computed property. And now let's head back to our book to find the gist for save data. And again, we're going through this a second time. We've already gone through it in detail and described all of the code. Plus, you've got all of this great reference inside of your text. But we do want to make sure that you've got techniques to build things very rapidly, both for your final exam as well as for your final project. And notice, like so much of the stuff that we've covered in this class, we specifically highlight, hey, if you're going to reuse this code, these are the lines that you need to change and why. So let's head into this gist, copy all of this save data code, then head back into our team.swift. I'm going to paste this method in just before the closing curly in the class. And some of the things that we need to change are, we had previously been saving things into a spots collection in Snacktacular. We need to change that to a teams collection here in our hackathon. And you could just search for the keyword collection, but we can see that just after the if statement in here, so change spots to teams. And the collection is also mentioned in the else portion of the same if-else clause. Change spots to teams here as well. That's it. If you want to be super thorough, you can change any mention in the comments as well. But the code that we're writing is super modular. I usually do a Command F for a find and do a search on the name of the class that I'm copying this from. So when I do a search on Spot, I don't see any additional mentions of Spot in the code. So this is looking good. Now we've got a few more changes to make. I'm actually surprised that some errors didn't pop up here because we haven't imported Firebase yet. So we're just going to say import Firebase. And our team class is pretty solid, so we're ready to go ahead and save data. And we're going to do that in our team detail table view controller. Now inside save button press, remember we want to take everything that we have in our labels and text view and use those to update the properties in our team object before we call save data on team. And to do that, instead of coding everything inside of our save button pressed, I want to create a separate function that does essentially the opposite of update user interface. We'll call it update from user interface, and it's just going to flip the assignment equations in here. So I'll create this just below the update user interface function. It's going to be func update from user interface, open and close parens because I'm not passing in any value, open and close curlies, and then inside, so we'll say team.teamName equals teamNameField.text, team.university equals universityfield.text, team.projectDescription equals projectNameField.text, and team.descriptionView equals descriptionTextView.text. Then make sure that we call update from user interface right inside of our save button pressed. What about the code for the save button pressed? You guessed it, we've got it just inside of our chapter. So let's head back to our online book, click on the gist. I'm going to highlight and copy the code inside of save button pressed. I suppose I could copy the whole thing, but I'm just going to take starting at spot.save data through the second to last curly, Copy this, Command C, head back to Xcode. I'm going to paste it right after update from user interface. I'm going to change that spot variable to a team variable. Everything else is going to work fine. I still have to create a leave view controller function here though. I'll put that in between these two IB actions. So I'm going to say func leave view controller. I'm not passing it any value, but remember, the reason we're writing this function is because we're going to leave the view controller the same way from cancel button pressed as we are from save button pressed. So according to DRY, don't repeat yourself, we're going to write a function and call that from our two IB actions. So I'm going to highlight the code I've got inside of cancel button pressed, cut it out, paste it inside of leave view controller, make sure that I call leave view controller from cancel button pressed. And a quick scan shows everything's looking great. You can put an angry emoji in here for your error. Hopefully your code remains pristine and you never see that print statement execute. But let's build and run. And I made a bunch of bonehead errors in here. I'll fast forward through the fixes since you likely didn't make these errors either. Sorry about that. First, when I created project name field, I clicked on the content view instead of the label. You see how it says UI view here instead of UI text field. So I'll fix this by making sure that the IB outlet now refers to a text field, and I'll connect the text field. Next, I also forgot to force unwrap the text property for my 3 text fields. You might have done that too, but just put an exclamation point after these. Now I can build and run. I'm going to position my simulator so that you can also see what's happening in my Firebase console's database view, although I'll probably have to refresh the browser before you'll see any of the database changes I've made. And here we go. I'll log in. I'll select continue to grant permission to use Google Sign-In. There's a token that remembers the previous Google ID I used to sign in. I can select that. I don't see anything in the table view, but that's because I'm no longer using the string array that had my dummy data in there. Let's click the plus bar button item to add our first hackathon team. This looks good. We'll likely want to put a frame around the text view at the bottom or remove the frames around the text fields above. The user interface is a little inconsistent. We'll worry about that later. And for our first team here, let's offer up a Game of Thrones theme. So the team name will be Hoders Coders, and they're from the University of the North. And their project will be the White Walker Stalker. And the description is, track the bad guys while grooving out to the techno beats of your favorite 7-foot DJ. Little Thrones trivia here, the actor that plays Hoder is also a DJ. He's played shows in the Boston area. Can't say if he swifts. Now click on Save, and we don't see anything in our app in our table view when we return to the table view. This requires us to load data, which we're going to do in the next video. And if we take a look at the browser in the back, we don't see anything yet, but if we refresh the page, all of a sudden we can see, yes, we have a teams collection on the left, and after a second we see that the collection shows one document for the hackathon team that we just added. This very unique ID was created by Firebase, but with this document selected we can see the values over here on the right. That's exactly what we typed into our app. The data you entered was sent off to the Google Cloud. Nice work. And, it looks like I got another error in my code. I'm missing a project name. You might have already spotted that I made this error. Let's go back and change that. It looks like in update from user interface, I updated the project name field.text with the team.project description. That should be team.projectname. But now that I made this change, I'm going to go ahead and build and run. Just to show you, if you ever want to get rid of some of the data, you can go back into the console and you'll see above the second and third column, there is this icon with 3 dots and a vertical line. I'm going to go to the rightmost column over here that's got the fields in it, and I'm going to click on that. I can either delete the document fields or delete the entire document. I'm going to select delete the entire document. You've got to confirm the deletion by clicking the red Start Delete button. And the selected document was deleted. Now, if you had a bunch of documents and you wanted to delete all of the documents, for example, if we had a bunch of documents in the Teams collection here, you can do the same thing with that 3-dot icon that's in the Teams column to the left. This is really useful in case you change the structure of your database and it would otherwise crash your code if you try to read in stuff with the old structure. And here's our app. We can click on plus to add that record again. I'll type in that data again real quickly. And watch what happens when we click on save. This time you actually don't have to go ahead and refresh. Apparently you just have to refresh that very first time when you add a record, but everything is looking good. In the next video, what we'll do is we'll load in these records and we can get that table view populated. Keep at it, Swifter.